We all know there are a million different ways to make a living, but on this show, we are curious about those businesses that you might not know about. We're going to take a deep dive every week and talk to a successful person in their field to learn about how they got their start and how they continue to make it in their space. Join me and learn more about the business of. Welcome back to the business of. We are learning about the craft beverage business, no longer just brewing beer, but other beverages as well. We're here with Brad Hittle from Two Roads Brewing. Welcome, Brad. We're excited to have you as part of the show.
Good to be here.
So tell me about Two Roads and how did you get to starting your own craft beverage company?
I'll give you the condensed version of that because it's long, but I've been in the beer business since 1990, believe it or not. I started out at a small little company called Labatt USA in Connecticut, and my brand was Rolling Rock. And before that, I was in the food business, working in marketing at Ragu Foods, doing, adding 10% extra tomatoes to Thick and Hearty, which took, no thanks. I got a call from a headhunter who said there's a position with Rolling Rock, and I said, I'm going to go after that. And the beer business is really special because, especially when you're in marketing, because there are emotional benefits and rational benefits, and you have to find the perfect balance of those to communicate and inspire consumers, whereas in other industries like the food, not so much like that, And I love it. I just absolutely love it. So fast forward, I became Chief Marketing Officer at Pabst, and really had a wonderful time there because they had all these incredible trademarks going back to the 1800s. I was brought in as part of a team to turn the business around and get it sold. It had to be sold, believe it or not, because it was owned by a charity.
Oh.
Yeah. And charities cannot own more than 20% of an operating company. So by law, the company had to be sold. It was in terrible condition financially. So this team came in, and we, over about 4.5 years, we turned it around, and it got sold. And the new owners asked me if I would stay on, but for a lot of good reasons, I decided not to. So at that point in time, I said to myself, okay, do I want to go work for another company or do something on my own? And I had learned while at Pabst that we had tried to expand our portfolio to get into the higher end craft segment, and we went and had almost every ingredient to be successful. Number one, we had a guy named Phil Markowski who was working at Southampton Public House, a small little pub but he was a renowned brewer.
Okay.
And I worked with Phil at Pabst to launch Southampton Public House nationally. So we had a great brewer, we had great products, we had really good marketing and packaging, but we couldn't find a place to make it. Oh. First of all, you would find some brewery that didn't have the right quality, so batch varied by batch, or the beer got infected, you name it, we couldn't find a place to make it. And then we found a larger brewery that could make it, but they were like a machine, and Phil couldn't experiment to perfect his beers. It just was a total nightmare. So I began to think when I left Pabst that gee, I want to get into the craft beer world because it's growing, but already it was clear it was going to be highly competitive. Because when we started Two Roads in 2012, there were 2,000 craft breweries, and up from in the 1980s, there were like 50-something breweries in the country.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I knew that was going to keep going, and sure enough, now there are over 9,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So I said, in order to compete in that environment, you have to have a really good brewer, and I knew Phil, and I knew he would be a home run. You had to have really good marketing. You had to be able to spend to support your brand, because distributors were being inundated by people walking in with, I got the greatest six-pack in the world, and my beer is the best beer in the world. And distributors like, what else you got? And so I figured I needed to go with the greatest brewer, really good marketing, and money to spend behind the brand. what way to get that money? To build a much larger brewery and invite contract brewing customers to come in to help absorb the overheads of that brewery, but also to allow me to take some of that money and spend it on Two Roads. So now when we walked into distributors, we had the full 9 yards for them. So it was a much easier sell to get our distributors to buy into our proposition and really support Two Roads. So that's what we did. It was a very road less traveled approach, because when I was writing the business plan, I would go contact all my friends in the business and writers and pundits, and they all said, "You're crazy. It's not going to work, and don't do it." I said, "Okay, the more you say that, the more I want to do it, because I like to take the road less traveled." And it's really worked out great. It's a different business now, because there are 9,000 breweries. The consumer taste is changing a lot, so we have to adapt, improvise a lot more than you had to even 3 or 4 years ago. It's a total different ball game, but we're in really good shape. So that's a sort of long story, but that's it.
So where did the name Two Roads come from? Let's start.
This is true. We were struggling. Do we call it Stratford Brewing Company? Do we call it Connecticut Brewing Company? And I kept saying, I don't want to be geographically confined. I don't want our brand to be built on a very local. There are very successful breweries that have done that.
Right.
But I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to have more of a global emotional appeal. On top of that, my mother made me read a lot of stuff that I didn't like when I was a kid. And
moms do that.
the one thing that I really did enjoy was the last stanza of the Robert Frost poem, Road Not Taken. And two roads diverge in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Loved that.
Yeah.
It didn't mean you have to be a contrarian, but it means you love to explore contrarian avenues before you pick one. And that's sort of the way I've felt about life in general. I used to work in an oil rig in Southeast Asia. So, and the other cool thing about the name is that it represents our business model. Because one road is Two Roads brand, and the other road is contract. And so it just was I told it to my partners, I said, "This is what we're going to name it," and they all said, "No question, that's what we should do." Because we debated and argued about everything, but that particular name is like, okay, let's go.
That's great. It sounds like it was one of those moments where it was just, it all came together. And
it was an
just
epiphany.
knew. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back in a little bit more with Brad from Two Roads Brewing. So we're back on the business of craft beverages here with Brad Hittle from Two Roads Brewing. We're going to learn a little bit more about the business model that you guys had and your journey from starting the business. So when you guys started building out the facility, did you need to look for investors, because you said that you knew you needed to spend money in order to get the product out there and get people interested? So did you guys take on investors from the beginning, or was this kind of a self-start, bootstraps situation?
It was a bootstrap operation to get the business plan properly written.
Okay.
And I can't tell you how much that business plan helped us, because it was extensive. It was really professionally done, and it answered a lot of questions that we thought investors would have. And one of my partners, Clem, is an engineer. He's got an engineering degree from Carnegie Mellon, and he used to write software code for F-16s, and then he got into marketing. Somehow or another, he decided to go very strange road less traveled for him.
Yeah.
And so he helped me construct the actual Excel 64 megabyte spreadsheet that really was the basis of convincing ourselves as well as investors that this is a good idea. And anybody who's doing something in a venturous way should really deliver a well thought out business plan. That helps a lot. But once we finished writing the plan, the sequence of events was really crazy, because we started to try to raise money, and this is in 2011 when you're coming out of the recession, and it was very difficult to even get people interested at that point in time. But in the meantime, we found this building in Stratford. So we started to negotiate on the building without having raised $1 of equity. And our business plan was required a lot of money because the equipment, the CapEx required for brewery is extensive. In fact, that's one of the things that I learned through this whole process is how much CapEx we underestimated, how much CapEx you need. Because tanks are tanks. I mean, these are stainless steel vessels. We had them made in Germany. We went for the higher end equipment because we wanted to be able to manufacture and brew and make super high-end, high-quality beers.
Yeah.
So we were struggling to get money, and then we actually started negotiating the building. Over the summer of 2011, I'm having lunch with some guys that I play golf with, and one of the guys is a wealthy guy. And he was talking about investments, and I said, well, I have a liquid investment for you to consider. And this is at lunch with a bunch of guys, so he goes, well, give me the 1-minute talk. So I gave him the 1-minute spiel, the elevator pitch, and he goes, that sounds really interesting. Come in to see me tomorrow. So I marched in there with Peter, my other partner, and we showed him the business plan, took him through it, and left there, standing on Madison Avenue. I called my wife. She goes, how did it go? And I said, yeah, I think it went pretty well. And then he came out for lunch. And he goes, oh, you guys are still here? He goes, count me in for a few million. And it's like, we're rolling now, baby. And it was really exciting to have an anchor investor. And that just made the big difference. And then, but the way it went down was amazing because we didn't have a purchase and sale agreement, which is the first phase of buying property. We didn't have that until September of 2011. We closed our financing in October of 2011. We still didn't have a contract on the building, but we had to order the equipment. So we ordered a couple $1 million of equipment with no home for it. You have to take risks.
Yeah.
And the building we bought just was so fantastic for a brewery. It's this old, 100-year-old factory building, and it's linear design, just like any manufacturing building would be, and that's perfect for brewing. It had a huge, high bays. You could put in these big, tall tanks. It just was perfect. And I'll tell you a funny story. We contacted a bottling equipment company to come look at the building to see what they thought about it. And this guy was a really, gruffy, sales guy in his 60s. And I picked him up and I drove him into the parking lot of this 100-year-old factory building. He goes, "No, that's a fucking brewery." That's pretty much when we knew we had the right building. And we aggressively negotiated to get the buildings before somebody else could get it.
Nice.
And we closed in March of 2012. We had to strip it out, all 100-year-old wiring, floors. We had to take everything out to the dirt.
Yeah.
Bring it all back in again, and by late October, 6 months, a little more than 6 months later, we were actually brewing.
Wow.
It was incredible.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Good thing you had pre-ordered those tanks to show up in that time frame.
The other cool thing about it was that the town of Stratford, they didn't give us the classic Heisman when we were getting permits and doing all of our planning and zoning and everything else. They would say, you need to do this, and here's how we think you could do it. So they were very helpful. They didn't skirt anything and go into gray areas, but they just said, here's how we can help you, which expedited the process. In the other towns that we talked to before we bought this building, we knew we were not going to get that kind of help. And it could have been a year or more before we were up and running. And as I said, there's so many breweries coming on. We had to be fast.
Yeah.
We really had to be fast.
That makes sense. So taking a risk of buying the property before you even had capital, what was another risk that you guys have taken that has really worked out for you beyond, when you were really starting the business?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of risks. I mean, one of them is that we hired a lot of people from the get-go as sales reps really get out there and make a difference in the sea of competitors. And that worked out beautifully. And I give our team a lot of credit in that everybody who worked at Two Roads really bought into the road less traveled. They bought into the excitement of the culture because we have a wonderful culture. So that wasn't a high risk, but it was certainly a risk. I mean, from a capital equipment point of view, we early on, we realized that there's some things we needed to invest in, like a canning line. Within 6 months of opening, we had a can line, which was not part of the original plan. So that's a $2 million investment. That's a risk. And then most recently, we realized the industry is changing so much from an innovation point of view. As you mentioned early on, it's a craft beverage company now because there's just so many things consumers are now jumping into. In order to do that well and proper, and by proper I mean, avoid product risk, you need a pasteurizer. You need quality equipment. And we've invested over $1 million in innovation equipment. You're seeing a lot of it here in this brewery. We have a 10-person lab quality department. We take it very seriously because that is a key part of competing in this business, is having quality and consistency. So we've taken a lot of risks along the way and mostly worked out.
That's good. Can you tell me about a time that you took a risk that didn't work out? It was a learning experience.
There's many of those too. You can't succeed without failure. It just happens.
Right.
I think our resiliency is something to talk about because we learn. We do a lot of root cause analysis. We're very data driven on how we solve problems. I'm proud of our team. But one thing we did was, it might have been a bridge too far, is we went into California. And that far away, it's hard to manage a market. We went in, and we went in about 2 months before COVID hit, and we just got clobbered. And by going into a market, we had to hire somebody to be there. We had to appoint a distributor. We had to invest a certain number of dollars per case. So, that hurt. That stung. But one of the reasons why we felt we could do it is that we went into Colorado. Before that, the reason why we went into Colorado was to test the brand proposition of Road Less Traveled and all the quality and graphics. And we did really well in Colorado. And that's when I kind of felt like, okay, we have a really good, well-positioned brand. The confirmation of that was in 2019, the fall of 2019. A friend of mine's in banking, and he has a client from China who's in private equity, and they wanted to come see a brewery in the United States. So 6 guys from China marched in here one night. I gave them a tour, and we drank the beers, and then they saw the poem on the wall. The road less traveled, individuality, nonconformist. Imagine people from China being interested in that. Their eyes just opened up unbelievably because they understood English, and they saw the poem. They said, oh my God, that is so relevant, which is a confirmation of our global appeal of our positioning.
Right.
And by the end of the night, they're like, you're coming to China.
Wow.
You're coming to China, and we're going to talk about opening tap rooms in China and all this stuff. So it was a wonderful affirmation of who we are and what we mean to people.
That is a very cool moment to have.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the moment where you felt like that this was your aha moment of this being a viable business where, there's still growth to be had, but you weren't, struggling every single day to make sure that your business plan was being met?
It was pretty rapid.
Okay.
We raised a lot of money to build out a brewery and build out a sales force and everything else. So it was nerve-wracking because we had no cash flow coming in and we had all these overheads. The first check that I had to write out of the newly raised capital was a ransom check.
Oh.
Because my head brewer Phil,
Uh-huh.
had been working at Southampton Public House, and he forgot to tell me that he had a non-compete. So I've announced to the world that Phil's going to be our brewer, and all of a sudden they're saying, you owe us some money. So I cannot tell you how anguishing that was, because I had to tell my board that the first check I had to stroke, and it was a hefty one, was ransom. And I wanted to name the first beer we ever made Ransom Note or something like that and rub it in somebody's face, but I decided not to.
Maybe later on down the line.
Yeah, yeah. But we knew with certainty when we ordered the canning line, and we were only open for 3 months.
Yeah.
We knew we were on the road to success. Now, since then, I had a couple people come and say, "Gee, would you like me to arrange to have you guys bought out?" And the answer is no. And we've had our challenges with COVID. Right? And so right now we are on Two Roads version 2.0, climbing out of COVID and adjusting to the new world. And we have a lot of exciting things that are going to help us succeed greatly in version 2.0.
Awesome. Well, when we come back, we'll learn a little bit more about how the business is changing and where we see Two Roads going in the future. And we are back on the business of with Brad Hittle from Two Roads Brewing. We are going to learn a little bit more about how the business is changing and where you see the business going in the future. So tell me, you mentioned COVID earlier and how the landscape is changing, and there's 9,000 craft breweries out there. Tell me a little bit more about the challenges and where you see the category going, and how does Two Roads fit into that?
Yeah. Well, up until COVID, we were just cruising along. We became the 44th largest out of 9,000 independent craft breweries. Yeah, but you can't rest on your laurels in this business whatsoever. And you certainly, I think every brewery out there has realized that their portfolio has to adapt. Today, 25 or more % of every beer consumed today didn't exist 3 years ago. So each year you have that percentage, so that the impact on the business in terms of new products and innovation is extraordinary.
That is a high number.
Yeah, it's very high. So you have to be able to innovate, but you can't do the classic spaghetti against the wall. I went through that in the 1990s, observing all the big brewers when craft beers started to come along, and I literally heard an executive from Miller say, "Our strategy is to throw spaghetti against the wall." I was absolutely shocked to hear that. So you can't do that. You have to think things out. You have to use data. You have to use category trends. You have to invest in getting those things. And but it's still very, very, it's less predictable than it ever has been. The seltzer segment went from 0 to 12% in 5 years. The craft beer segment from 1978 until today is a 12 share too.
Wow.
So it took, just think about that and the bandwagon effect of people jumping on seltzers. And there's other macro trends out there that are somewhat nerve-wracking. Younger people are drinking less. Their attention is diverted to other, I call it the share of high. It used to be wine, spirits, and beer, and now you have marijuana, THC, CBD, you name it, all coming into play. So it's very intense right now. We built this area 2 here as an innovation center. It's really our skunk works for us to experiment and look at new products, new concepts, and do them really well, which is what we can do because of this facility here. So we have a lot of irons in the fire in terms of innovation. We're coming out. We're not late, but I think we're sort of on the front edge of the wave on a non-alcoholic. And it tastes so good. It tastes better than anyone out there. We're going to be launching that in probably April.
Okay.
And I'm very excited about that. But we're working on CBD prototypes and a few other things. But the consumer behavior is constantly changing. Retailers and what they support and don't support is constantly changing. Getting your distributors to remain in love with you is a continuous challenge. So, these are all the things that we're facing. And you just have to think road less traveled. And you have to be like water. Get around it, over it, or under it. But that's what you have to do.
But you can't stay in one place. You have to keep going.
100%. If you rely on the past, you're gonna sort of shrivel on the vine. Go ahead.
So that takes me to what I am drinking, which is called Daybreaker, and it's a vodka cocktail with blood orange. I am not normally a vodka drinker, but this is really delicious.
We tricked you.
You tricked me. I like beer, and now I'm drinking vodka from a can.
This is a great example of innovation. There's quite a few vodka-based or spirits-based canned cocktails is what they're commonly referred to. And we said, we're not going to get into this and just be a me too. Let's do it with real fruit. Yeah. So when you open that can, it's like having a really nice screwdriver poured at a bar.
Right.
Because it has real fruit in it. A lot of people use what's called natural flavoring.
Yes.
Which are chemically extracted natural flavors, and we really didn't like the aftertaste of that. Yeah. And so we have a superior product. And we are really excited about this. We're going to do an 8-pack variety pack, and we're going to hit it hard this year. And it's delicious.
It is delicious, like very delicious, and tastes very fresh. So you should definitely try it out.
Yeah.
Tell me about your naming process for your different products, because I think that feels like it's one of the reasons you guys have been so successful.
I mean, the names are the brand name Two Roads. I gave you the origin of it, but that's like the essence of the brand right there. Then we come up with clever style names.
Yep.
And those names are derived from a sense of who we are, our place here at the brewery, and typically having something to do with two roads. Not all the time. We don't restrict ourselves to that. The road thematic or the two, the number two. We get our team involved at the brewery. We send out emails to everybody. Hey, here's the product we're going to make. Submit some names. You get some really crazy stuff. Some not printable. Others just crazy. But one way or another, they're very well thought out, the names. And a lot of them are not. In the beer business, you can find a lot of contrivance in names and graphics, such that you don't stand out on the shelf because everybody's doing that.
Right.
And our architecture, our packaging architecture is done really well done. It's a consistent look, so people know that Two Roads is there. It's a brand they can trust, and it's a brand they can find readily. And I've worked with a design shop since the 1990s, believe it or not, and they're still at it, and they've been driving this process with us.
Wow. And
the result is the consistency of everything we do, from the flight paddles with our Two Roads arm on them, and everything's consistent.
Yeah.
So we don't look contrived,
right.
And that's really important.
I feel like Two Roads definitely has that authenticity that you're looking for, both from a brand perspective, but also when you're just in the individual products you guys are bringing out.
Be authentic in this like 9,000 breweries. Let's say each brewery makes 10 different brands. That's 900,000 names you have to differentiate yourself. I mean, it's crazy. But I'll give you an example, like Little Heaven. When we bought the building, the factory building, the lady who sold us the building, her great-grandfather had started the company that was making metal forming machinery in this building. And there was this very narrow doorway. I'll show this to you later on. With this narrow set of stairs going into this mysterious mezzanine between the floors, where you had to hunch down like this to walk. And I said to her, what is that? And she said, oh, that's where my great-grandfather used to go and sneak cigarettes. And he called it Little Heaven. I I guess I can buy that. And then I asked the maintenance guy that we inherited from the company, I said, what is that really? And he goes, oh, that is called Little Heaven. But that's where employees used to go up and get drunk and have sex. It's like, we're calling a beer Little Heaven. So there's a story behind everything.
There's a story behind everything. That's awesome.
Authenticity.
Yep. Anything else that you want to touch on?
I could just tell you that we're a success not because of the idea, not because of, well, Phil is a big part of it, but we are a success because of the people who work here. And I mean that. I mean that. I get so proud and I get chills and goosebumps thinking about our team and how committed they are and how they love coming to us with ideas, with how we can do things better. We celebrate a lot. We have parties, and the community kind of sees that. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the most rewarding things about this whole thing. I've always worked for somebody, and now, having started this company, I can't tell you how important it is to have a good team and how important it is to support them and how rewarding it is to see them love working at Two Roads. That's the biggest thing.
I mean, to have a successful business, it does feel like having a great team is one of the major things you have to have. Beyond all the other, magic
Product,
pieces and
yeah.
product and everything, but like having a team and building that community within your company, that's something to celebrate.
Yeah, it is.
Well, thank you so much. It was wonderful learning more about the craft beverage business, the ever-changing craft beverage business, here with Brad Hittle from Two Roads Brewing.